Welcome to the Citizens of Tech podcast, a show where we discuss all sorts of interesting technology without skipping the details. And this isn't really a news show. I mean, yeah, we talk about some newsy stuff, but we try to include more of the science and the nerdy details that make the stories interesting. And while we're at it, we also have a bit of fun with features like Death Watch, and we look back to the past at old technology, and we peer ahead to technology we think might be the future. So we hope you'll stick around today as we discuss making your bricks the open source way, Googlemobiles, 4K streaming with Roku, a DOA phone, LP cover art, orbiting memory, carbon nanotube, non-volatile RAM, and more. And I am Ethan Banks. Follow me for mostly technology tweets at EC Banks. Eric Sutphin, my fellow Citizens co-host and producer, joins me today. Today being November 9th, 2015, and a beautiful day it is. Eric, how are things?
Things are good. It is a beautiful November day today, and I'm looking forward to jumping into all the tasty little tech tidbits we have. How's that for alliteration? Always avoid alliteration, Ethan. Always avoid alliteration.
Well, why don't you jump into the news then with this Kickstarter project we found?
Yeah, so this thing is really kind of cool. It's called the Liberator Compressed Earth Brick Press. URL will be in the show notes as always. This is an open source compressed earth brick press. So it's open source hardware, which is I just love the idea. So this quote is taken directly from their Kickstarter. It just says, Ajar Tech is kicking off its first big project and we need your help. We want to bring compressed earth brick presses, CEBs, to the masses as they should be, open source. The Liberator CEB allows you to take clay and dirt dug for foundations and compress it into bricks for a house, a factory, a wall, anything. It's an exciting project and we can't wait to bring you on board. So the idea here is obviously they're kickstarting. They want money. The money will turn this project into an open source CAD document that anyone can use. So you can download this CAD file and then you can fabricate this machine from parts that you either, you're not going to probably 3D print this because it's too big, but
They wanted the plans to be able to be purchased at the hardware store. You buy the plans, you go to the hardware store, you pick up all the parts you need for this thing, make yourself a press on site so you can make your own bricks, and then off you go. And I guess I don't know that I really want to go out and make all of my own bricks, but I was just so enamored with the notion of it. Open source plans that I can use to on-site make my own bricks. And they kind of pointed out, well, if you need bricks, making them yourself on-site is sort of an efficient way to go. You're sourcing your materials locally. And if you've ever tried to haul around a ton of bricks, it's like hauling around a ton of bricks.
Which is ironically not any harder than hauling around a ton of feathers.
Ironically, it is not. Now, this Kickstarter, I mean, it's not doing particularly well. They're having
problems building funds.
They need to open source some money.
Yeah.
They're looking for $20,000 pledged by Wednesday, November 18th, 2015 is the end of the Kickstarter. So we're recording this on November 9th. So it's got about 8 days to go.
And
hopefully we get this thing published in a few days. So if you're hearing this and we just released the show, there's still time. Go to Kickstarter.com and fund this thing if you think it is cool.
I see an application here beyond just, hey, I want to make my own bricks, or, I'm building a house and I have all this earth material that I want to use and not just, push into the backyard, is developing countries and things. It seems like this could be useful for them. But at the same time, it's not being pitched that way. So maybe that's part of the funding issue, but I don't know.
Yeah, it does seem like a valid use case, like water treatment sources and how to dig your own latrines. And there's a lot of plans out there for developing nations to improve their quality of living by sharing what the first world is doing and is automated and we don't even think about anymore. But yet, because of economic barriers or just other impracticalities, it's really hard to pull off in the third world. So.
Yep. So speaking of first world things that the third world would never even have to think about, how about self-driving cars?
Yeah, so here's a story from Ars Technica. Google's cars need to drive less like robots and more like humans. We've all heard about Google and their self-driving cars. This is not new. They've been puttering around the Silicon Valley area for years now at this point, and they keep getting
6
better
years
and
or
better.
something. Yeah.
And so the article points out that training is going pretty well for what I'm going to call the Googlemobiles, and they are really safe. Only 16 accidents recorded since 2009, and most of those were other human beings, rear-ending the Googlemobiles. So the thing to keep in mind here, though, is that Googlemobiles aren't sentient. So if you or I are driving in our cars and some weird situation presents itself where we're behind the wheel, we react in whatever way we've gathered through learning and just being sentient beings that can take heretofore unknown information and quickly assimilate it and then make a decision. The Googlemobiles aren't like that. They are victims of programming, and therefore they are victims of unforeseen circumstances. If they weren't programmed to deal with the weird circumstance, then they don't always do well. And there was a couple of examples cited in the article. One was a fixed gear cyclist. So fixed gear meaning it doesn't have a freewheeling hub. It's the chain is attached between the front and back sprockets. So the fixed gear cyclist is balancing on his bike at a stoplight. And this has prevented the Googlemobile from moving, just the way that this cyclist was in his field of view. He wasn't moving, even though at the time he was supposed to be. He didn't know how to handle that thing.
Yep.
Another example was a Googlemobile would not go around a double yellow line, wouldn't cross the double yellow line, despite being stuck behind a double parked vehicle.
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
I mean, what would we do? We'd look at the double parked vehicle. We'd look around to say, can I safely get around? Yes, I can. And then off we'd go. We'd cross the double yellow line if we needed to get around the double parked vehicle.
But that situation had never been programmed, and so it didn't have any clue what to do. Right.
Exactly.
I don't know what to do.
Well, this reminds me that there's a big movement in research and academia around machine learning and developing the algorithms that enables a machine to learn from previous situations. I don't know if it's applicable to here because effectively what we're talking about, to be able to handle every possible situation, would be artificial intelligence. That's really what we're getting towards. Right. I don't know, nor do I mean, I don't know, Eric. Do you think that's a requirement for a Googlemobile to be safe, or any self-driving car to be safe? It's got to be, AI.
I don't know that I'd take it that far, but there are implications here when it can't, intelligently make a decision because some parameter, it cannot violate some parameter, like crossing the double yellow line. That you're actually sort of causing a safety issue by not crossing the double yellow line to pass that double parked vehicle.
Well, I was going through this in my mind, and I'm thinking to myself, well, is it? I mean, it's erring on the side of caution, and so is it causing a safety issue by being behind the double parked car? The double parked car already created the safety issue, right?
Oh yeah.
So
I'm not pinning the situation on right, but I mean, if you're completely stopping traffic. That's and there are cars lined up behind you. That's going to cause other extenuating circumstances.
Certainly annoying.
Yeah, at the very least.
Yeah, certainly annoying. It's just the thing that bothers me about this, I guess, is okay. They've been driving these cars around since at least since 2009, according to this article. That's 6-ish years, six plus, going into 7 years of training. How many situations are there that have yet to be encountered? It seems like there's maybe
it does seem like the bulk of situations would have been documented and assessed at this point, I would think. But yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule.
I'm wondering at what point do we call it and say, all right, it's safe enough, let's put them in the wild, and then kind of like a manufacturer in IT releasing a product. Okay, it's fine. It's 2.0. It's out. We're putting it out there. We're done. We
found all the bugs we could find. Now you guys find them.
Exactly. Now you guys find them. So when they release Googlemobiles to the wild, is it going to be now you guys find them and we see what happens?
I just pictured when you said that. I just pictured letting a dove go, fly, be free. Go, little Googlemobile.
Oh, speaking of fly, be free, you have scrounged up some information on Steam. They are letting fly and be free some new hardware and stuff, eh?
Yeah, so this has been in the works for a while here. There was a big hullabaloo about the new Steam controller. And the crazy thing is, if you ever see a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, whatever controller, usually they have 2 analog sticks and, a slew of buttons and triggers up on top and all that. The Steam controller actually eschews the double analog stick paradigm. How's your buzzword bingo going?
No, you were talking about the 2 thumbsticks?
Yeah.
Analog sticks? Those, they're infinitely variable directions and all that stuff?
So initially, they weren't going to have a thumbstick on the controller at all. And basically, it's 2 touchpads in their place, which seemed kind of counterintuitive for when you need that fine-grained, analog movement. So they kind of went back to the drawing board. They still have the 2 touchpads on there, but now they have 1 analog stick for your left thumb, which is what most people, are used to. And then they have the action buttons, X, Y, A, B, almost exactly like a Xbox controller. So you have these touchpads on the controller, and I've never used one, but some of the reviews that I've listened to and read say that it's kind of tricky to get used to, but once you do, it's really great because this controller allows you to use, essentially, it's like using a mouse on your controller, but you also have an analog stick for other stuff. So it enables you to use this controller to play PC games with the controller and still have access to the pointer and all that without having to reach over and grab a mouse or a trackball or whatever.
I guess I could get used to anything, but my gut reaction is kind of like, ugh. So there's an old arcade game called Kicks where you got this little set of lines kicking around the screen, right? And you're trying to box it in without it hitting you. Well, that's joystick driven. Back in the day, you change the direction of your little guy with the joystick. Now I have a version of that on my phone, kind of a knockoff version of Kicks on my phone, and I have to use the touch screen to change directions.
Nearly impossible.
It's really awkward. I mean, it's no matter how fast you are, nothing is as fast and as intuitive as the joystick. Trying to swipe to make it go. I've died many times because that is not what I meant to do at all.
So yeah, they saw the folly. They added 1 analog stick. I think it's going to be a better controller now that they've done that. So those are actually, if you pre-ordered them, it's too late now, but they're shipping tomorrow. If you order one now, you can get them the first week of December. So if you're looking to get something for a PC gamer in your life, that's a great idea. It's $49.99.
Well, to me, the big thing here is Steam is really expanding, right? It used to be just we're like a gaming ecosystem, and here's a way that you can shop for and get games, and now it's hardware and a growing hardware ecosystem. And is this a viable Xbox alternative, or would you just kind of add it to your pile of consoles?
There's an interesting sort of split here. I mean, the next item that they're shipping is called Steam Link, and this is a little hardware device that you plug into your wired network ideally because you need the bandwidth. It can work over wireless N, wireless AC, what have you, but you hook it up to your TV and then you sync it up with your Steam controller. So this is another $50 device. So for $100 you can have this. So if you've got a gaming PC with Steam installed on it, you can stream all your games to your big screen TV sitting on the couch and interacting with your Steam controller, which kind of turns your PC into a console.
So Steam Link is not a gaming console. It doesn't render video. It just is a proxy for
Correct.
The computing that is happening on your Steam-based
exactly
PC.
what it is. Yep, because Steam has what's called in-home streaming, and I actually use this fairly frequently to stream to my light laptop sitting on my lap and up in the living room or whatever, so I don't have to be at the PC. This acts as that proxy and outputs 1080p stream to your TV, and the input and output from your controllers, etc., gets streamed as well. So that's sort of the consoleization of Steam. And then there are the Steam machines, which are the big thing that Valve is pushing, Valve being the company behind Steam. So Steam machines are custom-built standalone devices by OEMs, or you can actually build your own. The interesting thing here is that Steam OS runs on these. It's not Windows, it's not Mac OS, it's a customized Linux distribution based on Debian Linux. And they've got hardware manufacturers from Alienware, so Dell, Cyber, which is a gaming a PC company, and there are other OEMs that are signing on for this. You'll buy these; it'll come with SteamOS installed. You plunk it down, you plug it into your TV, plunk it down, sign in with your Steam account, and download the games that you already own. Or buy new ones, and there you are, ready to play. So Valve is definitely pushing towards a consoleization. I don't know if that's a real word, but I'm making it one of this
now.
platform. So it's definitely an interesting time.
So those boxes that are put up by Alienware and Cyber spelled with an S, are those available? And do we know a retail price?
They start like the Alienware starts at $449, and that comes with, I think that's like an i3 processor with a relatively decent video card. So you're plunking down more than probably an Xbox One or a PS4 at this point. But if you already have a bunch of games in your Steam library, then you don't have to purchase new games. You buy an Xbox One, you need Xbox One versions of things. You use the PC version of your games. As for the actual purchasability of them, I don't know if they're actually shipping yet, but I know you can order them. It looks like you can actually order these things at this point. That some of them are sold out. But yeah, you can. The entry level Alienware one's $449.99, and then it goes up to $750 for the top end one.
The top end one, I'm assuming, means you're going to get better frame rates at higher resolution, and that's
exactly
probably the biggest driver.
Yep, more hard drive space, faster processor, better video. That's basically the long and short of it.
That's going to be a tough sell for people that are used to. Well, I say that. I mean, because people are also dropping $60 for brand new games,
right?
PS4 and Xbox One, so.
and PC gaming is a different niche because to get top end specs, you're shelling out hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the newest best video card.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I spent $150 on my PC in the last 3 years, and it's able to, exceed the PS4 and Xbox One on resolution. So, it's all, where do you want to invest the money? And like the Steam Link is compelling to me because, yeah, that'd be great to just sit down at the TV and play my PC games with a controller. And I've sort of messed around with it, but having dedicated hardware that's all it does seems appealing. I have no experience with it at this point. But
the Steam Link technology, it reminds me of a few other things I've heard of. Like in enterprise IT computing, there is NVIDIA a Grid, where you take these Grid video cards, GPUs, you drop them into your hypervisor host, and now you can accelerate VDI, virtual desktop.
Yep.
Through it, and it's similar kind of stuff where you're doing a lot of polygons, 3D rendering inside of some remote machine and getting the full benefit of that via some very lightweight client on the other end. So it does seem like this must be viable technology, because I'm seeing it in other places as well, including enterprise IT stuff. So, boy, it sounds like Steam is coming for you.
Yeah, it really
does.
does.
Microsoft and Sony. So, Nintendo, they have one too.
Yeah, kind of. So one last bit of gaming news is, for anyone that follows the Fallout series, does not come as a surprise. We're recording this on November 9th, so tomorrow is Fallout 4 Day. The initial reviews are mixed, but generally positive. I am super excited for it because it takes place in Boston, which is, roughly our neck of the woods.
Okay, so I haven't played any of the Fallout games, so just fill me in real quick. I can kind of guess from the name. Sounds like dystopian future post-nuclear war?
Yeah, very much so. Generally speaking, it takes place a few hundred years in the future, after a nuclear event. Humanity, what's left of it, survived in these underground vaults for hundreds of years, and then finally people start to emerge and find out that, well, everything's lousy, but it's livable, whatever. The interesting thing is it's always sort of set back in the 1950s technology, the height of the Cold War, sort of 1950s, 1960s technology. So the TVs and cars are sort of, old school style, but they're more modern. But yeah, it's surviving the nuclear apocalypse, basically, and then trying to restore civilization and all this. So yeah, this one takes place in Boston. So all the famous locations should be around. They actually went around and did site surveys and took photos and modeled up a large chunk of the Boston area. So
like the Freedom Tower and the Golden Gate Bridge and the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah, they're all there.
For those of you who don't live in the U.S., none of those things are in Boston.
So it's interesting because the reviews are basically comparing it with Fallout 3, which was not actually the last Fallout that was made. Fallout New Vegas was, which we briefly mentioned a few episodes ago. But they were developed by different development agencies, just published by the same publisher. So it sort of really isn't a successor to Fallout New Vegas. It really is the successor to Fallout 3, which is actually older than Fallout New Vegas, clear as mud. Basically, the long and short here is it has upgraded visuals from Fallout 3, better character development. You might actually care about some of the non-player characters, but it is the same old when it comes to gameplay. So if you loved Fallout 3 and even New Vegas, you will probably love Fallout 4 as well. It's just more of what you already like. So that is a brief little overview on Fallout 4. I am super excited. I will probably be awake at midnight when it launches because I already have it downloaded. That's one of the things Steam does. You can pre-download it and then they unlock it when it's ready to play. So at 12:01 tonight, I'll fire it up and play for a little bit, and then I'll probably pass out. But
I will look to the south, and if I see a mushroom cloud over Boston, I'll know you're engaged.
Sounds like a plan.
So moving on to a story, Roku finally gets into 4K with a new streaming box and some updated software. There's plenty of coverage out there. If you Google Roku 4K article here, I pulled some details from Ars Technica and from blog.streamingmedia.com for some of what we're going to talk about here. So first of all, a new Roku box. And if you don't know what a Roku is, Roku, for my money, is the best, most easily usable streaming player. So this is a little box. You plug it into your network, you plug it into the HDMI port in your TV, and it presents to you a menu of streaming channels and makes it easy for you to consume internet content. So I use it primarily for Amazon Prime, YouTube, the PBS channel, the Smithsonian channel, the TED Talks, and there's tons and tons and tons of different channels that are out there. Roku makes it easy to consume. So the Roku 3 has been the hot player for kind of a while now. It's about $99, comes with this great wireless remote control with a built-in headphone jack and an IR port for people like me who use universal remotes and kind of HDMI. It's wired or wireless, etc. That's the Roku 3. That's, again, been a wonderful device for a long time.
Love my Roku 3. Yep.
Yeah. So now the Roku 4 has been announced, and the specs include 802.11ac, which is basically gigabit Wi-Fi, 4K at 60 frames per second video rendering capability. So 4K meaning not simply 1080p, but now 4K, which we're going to talk about a little more in a second here, and 60 frame rate. Most TV you're going to consume is more like 30 frames per second. So it's got lots of video power there. And reportedly, neither the new Apple TV, that is overpriced badly, Apple, you messed up, or the Amazon Fire Stick, neither of those can do 4K at 60 frames per second anyway.
Yep.
And so we have an enabler here, HDCP, High Definition Control Protocol. I think 2.2 is an enabler that is making this happen. The only other device that I'm aware of that has got HDCP 2.2 in this class of devices is the TiVo Bolt. And so presumably it will support 4K at 60 frames per second, but that's not that the TiVo Bolt is not available yet.
Yep.
So gut reaction, Eric. Before we get into a few more details, do you care?
I care, but not enough to buy one personally at this point because A, I don't have a 4K TV. B, I don't have fast enough internet for 4K streaming. And C, the Roku 3 really does everything I need it to at this point. So there's definitely a market out here for the 4K streaming, but there are issues with 4K adoption in general. I think is the biggest.
And you've highlighted exactly what I think the problems are going to be with this. First of all, there's not that many sets out there. It's pretty easy to get an ultra high def television. That's generally speaking the technology moniker aimed at consumers is UHD.
Mm-hmm.
How many people own one? Not many. Okay, even if you do own one, there's not much content out there. It's kind of like back in the day of, do
Blu-ray.
I want a high-def TV? Because there's no high-def content. The best I do is 480p from my DVD, and so on. Brr, I don't care. Well, we have that problem again. Everybody's got 1080p, or actually, I have an old 720p plasma. Don't tell anybody. I don't want people to know that's embarrassing. But 1080p is pretty normal, and but there's tons of content for it. 4K, there's nothing out there. And even if you, let's say, had tons of content and you were going to stream it over the internet. Get ready for some math here, folks. I did a little math in preparation for this. 4K streaming is a big bandwidth problem.
Yeah.
So 4K streams can theoretically be compressed down to about 10 or 12 megabits per second, theoretically, but they haven't even figured out how to get that far yet without too much loss. So, and even getting it to 12 or to 15 megabits per second is going to be tough without some efficiency improvements when you convert from the H.264 format to HEVC format required for 4K. So here's a case in point. Netflix 4K, they've got some content up there. Netflix 4K streaming is currently 15.6 megabits per second. Okay, so let's assume you've got a broadband pipe that's reliable and steady enough that you can consume a 15.6 megabit per second 4K stream. How many hours of 4K content can you watch before your bandwidth cap that almost all of us have is exceeded? And so based on a 15.6 megabits per second and a 350 gigabyte cap, which is what I have, the theoretical max is about 52 and a half hours. And that doesn't include protocol overhead. That doesn't include any of your other browsing, video chat, reading email, software updates. I mean, how much bandwidth do we consume in a month just because Apple releases a new software update for all our iStuff, you know?
I don't lose any.
Okay, mister, I don't have any Apple stuff anymore. Yeah, or your Android stuff, etc. You know exactly what I'm saying.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
So, I mean, man, we got a long way to go in America before we can even use 4K on something other than a satellite provider. And I don't think they figured out how to do the transmission yet, have they? I don't know. I know there were some issues about that.
I believe so, no. But I'm not up on my satellite technology, to be completely honest. 4K does not present the compelling switch motivation for me that the transition from 480p to 720 and 1080 did. I know it looks better. I've seen it. It looks good. It looks great. But it doesn't look good enough for me to go drop a few $1,000s on a TV and then, try to find content to stream and exceed my bandwidth cap and all that. It's just not compelling enough for me personally at this point. So therefore, the Roku 4 doesn't really do anything for me.
I'm in the same boat. Roku 4 is not interesting to me yet. 2 years?
Neither is any other streaming device. So, beyond what I already have. I don't need a Fire Stick. I don't have a use for a Chromecast. I don't need it.
I have a last generation Apple TV, and I have a Roku. I almost never use the Apple TV because it's unreliable. I use it mostly for display mirroring, which fails chronically.
But other than that, it's great.
And I watch on occasion the oddball things I've bought on iTunes, and other than that, it's Roku 3. That's really my one device that I use 95% of the time, and it's great. It's fast. It's really a great device.
Yep.
So Roku, you made the Roku 3 too good. I just don't want a Roku 4.
No planned obsolescence. That's, come on. Marketing 101, guys.
So we have a Death Watch this week, Eric. Something we are going to put on the funeral pyre and set it alight.
Before it's even available.
The BlackBerry Priv. Oh, goody. It's another Android phone. I'm so excited.
But this one has a physical keyboard.
Because it's BlackBerry. I mean, BlackBerry is almost like a historical footnote at this point. You remember BlackBerry? There was a while where everyone had a BlackBerry. Whatever happened to those guys? Well, they're still around.
They failed to license their technology and fell into obscurity. That's what happened to them.
Right. The big thing about the BlackBerry has always been the physical keyboard, and I sort of get that.
Yeah.
I have my new iPhone 6S Plus Superphone, and I still, even though it's so much bigger than the 4 I had, It's still tough to type on that stupid virtual keyboard, and I am not a fan of the predictive typing technology. It's okay, but maybe I'm too old. It just doesn't really work that well. So I guess for certain people, maybe the BlackBerry Priv, which is a terrible name, is an interesting phone. But again, dude, when is the last time you saw someone with a BlackBerry?
I don't even know. Several years.
I saw a guy sat next to me on the plane. He had two phones. He had an iPhone and he had an old-looking BlackBerry with a lot of scratches and wear marks on it.
Yeah.
And it was such a novelty. I almost asked him, like, what do you use the BlackBerry for?
Work phone, personal phone, probably.
Probably. Something like that.
That's the only place BlackBerry really has any sort of a foothold anymore, is where, extreme security is required. But everyone else is catching up in that regard. So, yeah. I mean, it's a nice phone. The Priv is a nice phone. I'm not going to lie. It's got a really nice 5.4-inch screen. It's AMOLED, so it looks great. It's got the same resolution as my LG G3. It's got a nice size battery, 3,410 milliamp hours. So that's a significant battery. Snapdragon 808 CPU is a little bit old at this point. It's not the 810, but 3 gigs of RAM. That's flagship phone spec right there.
Unless you're Apple, in which case they only put 2 gig in and then tell us we're lucky. So,
well, yeah. 32 gigs of storage, expandable with an SD card. The SD card thing is a big deal for me. I like that. It has a 18 megapixel camera, which 18 megapixel is like, but it's like saying 340 horsepower. It doesn't really tell you anything.
It doesn't give you an indication of the quality of the sensor that is taking the picture. It tells you you've got a pixel density. It doesn't tell you chroma bleed. It doesn't tell you a lot of other things that are going to impact the sharpness of that. And actually, what I read about that was that it does take a decent picture, but the camera is really slow. So most of these comments I found on TheVerge.com. I mean, if you Google BlackBerry Priv, there's lots of reviews. BlackBerry's been sending it around to lots of folks. But these guys, The Verge folks, were sufficiently cynical to capture my attention.
Oh, yeah. I'm seeing here they figure BlackBerry's CEO says they need to sell 5 million of these a year to stay in the consumer handset business.
In other words, the Priv is BlackBerry's Hail Mary.
Yeah.
If they don't sell 5 million of these things a year, then it is not a sustainable product for them, and that's it. They're now officially going to be done.
There's no way they're going to do that.
BlackBerry will do whatever they do. They'll find some niche. Maybe the Verge suggests they'll do software services for business and government. But
which they should have done 10 years ago. Yeah.
They're just gonna. I'm with you, man. I don't think there's any way in the world BlackBerry can sell 5 million of these phones per year of the BlackBerry Priv. Now, they call it the Priv, again, that hopeless name, because it's supposed to help you with privacy and security and that kind of stuff. And they haven't quite got the software right yet, although supposedly BlackBerry is going to be providing some updates that improve performance and tweak on some things and all that. But it's not anything I read about it about being able to handle your personal data. It just seems like it was just convenience features and nothing like I went, oh, that is earth shattering.
Yeah.
So I don't get. Plus, here's another thing. People were the physical keyboard. This is a slider phone. So you hold the phone. It looks like a touch.
Really?
A normal touchscreen phone. You slide it up to expose the physical keyboard that's underneath. And there's some pictures of this phone in people's hands. And they say, well, the way BlackBerry weighted it, it works. It doesn't feel like it's about to fall out of your hand and be top heavy. But still, it's like, wow, that's a lot of phone in your hand anyway. 5.4-inch screen, right? Now you add this keyboard on the bottom sticking out.
Yeah.
Whew, that's a lot.
Yeah. Huh.
That's a lot.
Well, good luck, BlackBerry, and Godspeed.
We've added you to our death watch list, so
happy trails.
We're not confident, but we wish you well.
Well, it's less putting the BlackBerry Priv on death watch and more putting the BlackBerry on death watch. But, yeah.
Oh, well, another thing here, content that I like. We've just started adding some of these to the show for unusual sites that we find interesting. And here's an oddball one for me. ST33, Uncovering the Art of the Vinyl Sleeve. And the website is st33.wordpress.com. And this is just kind of a neat old site, a neat blog. It just covers old album covers. It takes a look at art from back in the day when people were buying physical media. I'd actually go to a music store and buy a record, and inside the record with this black disc, made of vinyl, and it would be stored in a sleeve, and the sleeve would be an opportunity to have art on it as a marketing tool to entice people and engage them to buy the record that is inside the art.
And it oftentimes sort of, helped wrap up the artistic expression of the album as well. It was like a visual accompaniment as well. Sometimes, there were almost like photo books inside and things like that. Exactly.
Escalated beyond merely marketing and actually art that was meaningful to the music and tied the whole thing together as a cohesive concept. So on ST33, again, st33.wordpress.com, each blog post highlights a specific cover, and then the author talks about why he found it interesting, and that he's usually got a good bit of history behind that album cover and maybe some information about the record label that published it, all of it providing context that sheds a little bit of light on how the audience at the time might have received that album. And so
that's kind of compelling. I like that idea.
And another thing that I like about it is he doesn't post very frequently. He actually posts infrequently. This guy's name is Simon Robinson, and he describes himself thusly: I've been interested in album art since I was at school. As a designer, I even got to do a few vinyl sleeves in the late 70s and early 80s before the CD format took over, and I have been able to do a few vinyl packages again in the past couple of years as demand and interest means the format continues to thrive.
So the hipsters are giving him a job back.
But at the same time, he's not just killing you with, every crappy album cover he decided just to fill content. He finds ones that are really interesting to him as he's, what I would call dumpster diving, looking for albums, and then says, oh, this is a really cool one for these reasons. And so it's once every 2 or 3 weeks he'll put something out there, which means when it pops up in my Feedly, which is what I use it for to read my news, it's like a treat. It's like, oh, cool, I get to read a new ST33. I'm really excited.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So one that I found, actually my wife found it, is Ranking Digital Rights, and it's rankingdigitalrights.org. And taking this directly from their site here, what is Ranking Digital Rights? They are trying to classify internet and telecommunications companies. So to quote their site, internet and telecommunications companies, software producers, and device and networking equipment manufacturers exert growing influence over the political and civil lives of people all over the world. These companies share a responsibility to respect human rights. So they then go on to say that 16 internet and telecommunications companies were evaluated according to 31 indicators. You can go to the site and see what the 31 indicators were. They focus on corporate disclosure of policies and practices that affect users' freedom of expression and privacy. They also say company scores and accompanying analysis were generated through a rigorous process including peer review, company feedback, and quality control. So they ranked internet service companies such as Google and so forth, and the top ranked one was actually Google, which actually kind of surprised me. But it was Google, followed by Yahoo, Microsoft, and Twitter.
The top ranked, meaning if you are a consumer of their services, the way they look at how they're handling your information and your rights over the information that you share with them.
Correct.
It was a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, the higher the better. So then they also rank telecom companies. Vodafone topped the list there, followed by AT&T, Orange, and then America. They say, I don't know if this is a typo, but America Mobile. It's not mobile or mobile, but it's with a V instead of a B.
Be a typo. I don't know.
I was going to look it up, and frankly, I just couldn't be bothered. And so, it's a very interesting idea to have somewhere to analyze and have this information available for a consumer, when it comes time to make a decision about, okay, who am I going to, trust with my information and so forth. It's kind of cool to have at least a graph to peek at, I guess.
What's weird about this is when you introduce the site Ranking Digital Rights, I thought immediately, this is nation states. This is a site that looks, it's like a watchdog group that monitors the laws in various countries and ranks citizens' digital rights. And then you said companies, and I'm like, oh, the dystopian future is here.
Yeah.
The governments are beginning to fade into insignificance. It's all companies now. Crap.
Yeah, you can read into that as much as you want, but I don't think you're necessarily wrong.
Well, when you begin to read about all the lobbying efforts that goes on between these companies,
Why are
the way the FCC is handling certain situations, it's
the Trans-Pacific Pact. It's crazy. So yeah, that's so rankingdigitalrights.org. Take a peek, and I dug around there for a bit, and it was very interesting.
Well, let's move into Today I Learned. And today, Eric, I learned that the native format at a movie theater is 4096 by 2160 4K resolution.
Okay.
While the new Ultra HD consumer format has a slightly lower resolution of 3840 by 2160. And I found that up on techradar.com while I was researching the Roku 4K story.
Yeah, and that I had read something along those lines, and it never made any sense to me why consumer 4K wasn't actually 4K. Because 4096 would be 4K.
Yep.
But 3840 is the consumer one. So it's a weird one. But there is a rationale behind it, but it's kind of weird. So I learned something today. Today I learned that for terrible pronunciation here, probably muskeg is a very damp soil, which is why northern Ontario is almost uninhabited. It's not just because it's cold, but
that would have been my first guess.
So this very damp soil can sometimes be 100 feet deep or more. Unless completely cleared, it freezes and buckles construction in winter if you build on top of it. And then in the spring, when it melts, it swallows anything left. So locomotives, construction equipment, animals, etc. And that, so when it thaws, it becomes almost like quicksand, except worse. So yeah, muskeg, I think, is the pronunciation. And that's what any Canadians listening probably already knew or possibly knew. I had no idea, never even heard of it.
Huh, that's fast. It reminds me of peat. It reminds me of quicksand.
Yep.
And then reminds me that not everything in northern Ontario would be tundra or permafrost.
Quick peat. Peat, yeah.
Well, let's take a look at the past. And this is a story about a piece of memory from the Gemini 3 spacecraft. In other words, one of the orbiters from back in the 60s. In the U.S. space program, a piece of memory from a Gemini 3 spacecraft went up for auction. And at this point, the auction is over. I don't know how much the piece went for because you have to log in and have an account on the auction site for it to tell you how much it went for, which is like, let me think about this. No.
Nope.
But it's cool, though, because you would have gotten to buy a piece of history. And to quote from Engadget.com, where I found this story, do you want a piece of the first computer on a manned spaceflight? Of course you do. And you're in luck because a piece of RANAM, Random Access Non-Destructive Readout, from the Gemini 3 spacecraft's computer is up for auction. And I guess you could look at that as buying a piece of history or buying a piece of space junk. I mean, it's all
either way. It's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. Also interesting was a mention in the Engadget article that not all of the space missions required computers. Prior to Gemini, you had Mercury, for example, and Mercury did not use computers. Gemini, however, needed a computer both for both a second astronaut and an onboard computer that aided with 6 mission phases: pre-launch, ascent, backup, insertion, catch-up, rendezvous, and re-entry. And so the flight was more complicated than the Mercury program, such that you needed not just a computer, but a second person too, a second astronaut.
Yeah.
But kind of interesting to think actually the other way. The Mercury program did not have a computer at all. Huh.
Wow.
And I remember when cars were like that. You didn't have computers.
Yeah, right.
They were just, everything was mechanical, hydraulics, and
purge the carb and you're good.
Yeah, there wasn't a microcomputer processor on board. And back when I was a kid, there were certainly many cars kicking around that did not have a significant computer presence. Whereas I remember I bought a used 2006 Acura TL back in the day. You might remember that car, Eric.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That thing had 13 computers on it, they told me, between all the different sensor arrays that were on the car and then all the nav stuff inside and everything. So it's, I don't know that we're... I love all the technology in my car and hate it all at the same time because it means realistically, I can't do very much work on the thing.
Yeah, you're at the mercy of the dealer.
Now, you found something from the past too, right?
Yeah, so this is just a fun little thing. I specifically found My 90s Television. It's my90stv.com. And there's actually one for the 70s and 80s as well. You can go to mydecadetv.com. So My 90s TV is a throwback to the 90s, including commercials, movie trailers, game shows, sports events. In prep for the show today, I went back to the site and there was footage from I was actually looking at the 80s one, but there was footage from the Seoul, South Korea Olympics from the 80s and all the advertisements that went with it and all that. It's a crazy throwback. The 80s was the bulk of my childhood, the 90s the bulk of my adolescence. And, I went to the 80s TV, and the first thing I saw was a Richard Marx music video playing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about the site is they do it's era-appropriate presentation. So there's like an era-appropriate television that the video appears in, and there's a remote control, and you change the channels with it and all this. And then the video filters are there. So you're watching the 90s one. It almost looks like it's playing back off a VHS tape, and the tracking will sometimes, flip out a little bit. And if you go to the 80s, it sort of looks like, UHF signal with a little bit of graininess in it and all this. It's a really cleverly presented site. I don't know if it's pulling content from YouTube or somewhere else. I'm not sure. It doesn't have the usual YouTube embedded player controls and all that. Maybe he's doing it via an API that removes that. I don't know. I'm not a YouTube embedding expert. But like I said, I'm not sure where he's getting all this content, but it's a one-man show that does this site, and it was really fun. It was a trip down memory lane just in the 10 or 15 minutes that I messed around with it. So it's worth checking out. 90s
TV passed me by because between college and getting married early, my wife and I didn't have a TV for years. We just didn't. It wasn't really that important to us. Mm-hmm. I didn't see much 90s TV at all, so maybe I should go up there and catch up on the pop culture I missed.
Go watch you some Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, maybe I won't. So that brings us to the end of the past, and now the end of the past. Is that possible? Anyway, and now we're going to look ahead to the future. So I've got a story here about NanoRAM, or carbon nanotube NVRAM, non-volatile RAM, and this was inspired by the Gemini 3 spacecraft memory that went up for auction that we were talking about just a minute ago. As I was trying to figure out how that sort of memory worked, that old memory, random access non-destructive readout, which I could not find, which means I'm probably overthinking it. It's like, dude, it's really simple.
It's memory. It remembers things until it doesn't.
One of the things I found was that kind of sucked me in was carbon nanotube, CNT NVRAM, also termed by the one company that's into this space, NanoRAM or NRAM. So there's three different Wikipedia articles I'm going to refer to as I read about this stuff, and then a company. So the three different Wikipedia entries are nano-RAM, universal_memory, and then van der Waals force, van_der_Waals_force. And those will all be linked at citizensoftech.com if you want to dig in and read more about this stuff. And the company that makes this stuff, this carbon nanotube RAM, is called Nantero. So Nantero's been at this since 2001, working on this technology. And it looks like there's been some government-related projects that have shown some interest. Lockheed Martin, who is a big-time Department of Defense contractor, in August 2008 acquired an exclusive license for government applications of Nantero's intellectual property. And then in May 2009, a radiation-resistant version of NRAM was tested on the STS-125 mission of the U.S. Space Shuttle Atlantis. So there has been some of this nano-RAM used in real life, and there's Nantero's still at it. There's still ongoing research and projects. Nantero raised a total of over $42 million through the November 2012 Series D round. And by Series D, we're talking about venture capital funding, where folks that are interested in the company and think it has a bright future throw money at it in the hopes of getting a big return someday. So Series D means they're on their fourth major round of funding. And there's a whole bunch of different investors. Some of the investment names I recognize, some I didn't. And in May 2013, they completed that round with an investment from Schlumberger, and then EE, Electrical Engineering Times, listed Nantero as one of the 10 top startups to watch in 2013. So this is real stuff. This is the real deal, although it's very far from mainstream, which is why I put it in the future section. So, okay, so what is this stuff? What is NRAM or NanoRAM? Well, let's start with the why before we get to the what. Why do we care? What's driving this? And the DRAM, the kind of RAM we have in our computers today, DRAM can only scale down so small, only on a nano level as you get to the inner workings of the silicon and the electronics, the metal that is down at that scale. You can only go so small with DRAM. The end result is limited by it limits the amount of density you can get, and therefore the capacity that you can get out of this. So if you try to go smaller with DRAM, the metal electrodes inside can't hold a charge significant enough to indicate a 1 or a 0, right? Which is really important.
Sort of what memory does.
So on the assumption that we're we're going as small as we can go on the inside of a DRAM chip, we need something else, and NRAM is one possible answer here. Okay, well, why NRAM be interesting? NRAM is also faster than DRAM, more like the speed of SRAM. SRAM we know and we're used to. The trick with SRAM is that it's not especially dense, even though it's fast, but it's not especially dense, and so it's kind of costly for the amount of capacity you get out of it.
Right.
So NRAM is as fast as SRAM, and it's also more dense than SRAM. And so therefore, NRAM could someday be the ultimate RAM answer. And some suggest it is the universal memory, and that's a term, universal memory. And just to quote the Wikipedia article that defines it, universal memory refers to a hypothetical computer data storage device combining the cost benefits of DRAM, the speed of SRAM, the non-volatility of flash memory, and infinite durability, which is a big deal because certain kinds of flash memory, they are not infinitely durable. They have a certain number of read-write cycles, and then they're no good.
Yeah.
So such a device, such a universal memory device, if it ever becomes possible to develop, would have a far-ranging effect on the computer market. So is NanoRAM the universal memory? Could be. Let's talk a little more about how this stuff works. So NRAM can get smaller, limited only by than DRAM, right? Limited only by the ability of nanolithography to lay down metal pathways over the carbon nanotube grids. So, and they work at electron scale with lithography, so you can go quite small. And then, okay, so how does this stuff work? So NanoRAM would be made up of, this is a very simplified description here, a complex grid of carbon nanotubes that are used to store state permanently, i.e. without voltage having to be constantly applied. That's the non-volatile aspect of it.
Sure.
A 0 is represented by carbon nanotubes at a particular junction being apart. So if you've got one nanotube laying one way, another nanotube laying on top of it, perpendicular, but they're not touching, that's a 0. A 1 would be the carbon nanotube laying down. Now, there's a contact point between the two nanotubes.
So there's actually a physical state to this, and that's where the non-volatility comes in.
And that's how it is described, and there's a picture on the Wikipedia article that shows an illustration of the nanotubes in a 0 state and in a 1 state. And in the 1 state, there's a contact there. Gotcha. And I'm assuming this is where the lithography comes in. There's metal that's been laid down on top of the tube, and the two metal points intersect. Now you've got a junction. That's a 1. Wow. And so the only place that voltage comes in is either setting a 1 or a 0 state. There's a setting state and then a reset state. So you set to make it a 1, bring the nanotubes into contact, and the reset takes them back apart again. And so the question is, how do they maintain state without voltage? Again, voltage is only required to change state, not to retain that state. And so there's two states here: the 0 state when the nanotubes are apart, and the 1 state where the nanotubes are touching. In the 0 state, it is the stiffness of the nanotubes that allow them to hold their natural shape where they are not contacting one another. So it's the way they're made, man. When we manufacture them, put them together, they ain't touching. They're zeros.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no voltage required there. That's their natural state. However, when you apply voltage to drive contact between nanotubes at a specific memory location, now you've got this force called the van der Waals force that takes over and holds the nanotubes together. So what is a van der Waals force? Van der Waals forces include attractions and repulsions between atoms, molecules, and surfaces, as well as other intermolecular forces. In other words, voltage gets applied, the nanotubes move from a 0 state to a 1 state where they're now touching, and then molecular forces take over, and the nanotubes are attracted to one another molecularly, this van der Waals force, and it just holds them together without
because the carbon wants to stay together.
Yes, exactly. Way down at the molecular level.
That is so freaking cool.
Yeah. And then to get them back apart, you got to apply voltage again to change state and make them go back to a 0.
Right.
So,
man,
again,
that's awesome.
Again, Nantero is the company that makes all this stuff, and I apologize in advance for anyone who knows this stuff if I got some of the details wrong. I was just pulling all this together from Wikipedia, and it all made sense to me, so hopefully I got it right. But the universal memory idea is just awesome. It really sounds great. I mean, memory is a bottleneck talking to CPU, and there's different workarounds for that. So, I mean, the notion of being able to come up with a memory bus that is speedy, non-volatile, and highly dense, and then assuming it could be manufactured at scale and be cost efficient, which I am speculating wildly here is maybe the big problem Nantero is trying to deal with.
Yep.
It changes everything, right? And imagine this when it goes to quantum computing, where we try to move into that state and the speed and challenges that we'll run into there. It's really interesting to see this sort of technology move along, and carbon nanotubes are just cool. We didn't even talk about what carbon nanotubes are, but I mean, it's just really cool stuff.
The gateways that are being opened up in biotech and computing and everything with carbon nanotubes is astonishing. It's great.
Well, Eric, what do you think? Have we done this Citizens of Tech show? I think we have.
I think we've done it, and it's done.
Well, as we bring this show to a close, we remind you that joining as one with V'ger is probably a really, really bad idea, no matter how poetic it sounds. I mean, let's face it, you are not the creator. You're just not. So how do you think it's going to go for you when V'ger figures out your lie, that you're merely representative of a species and not the actual maker, that all of your so-called answers are really overwrought platitudes designed to take advantage of the childlike nature of this unimaginably large intellect? It's all over, man. It's all over. I see a universal singularity in your future. Yeah. Do you want to be responsible for that? Do you want to be the one bringing about the end of all things? No, I didn't think so. So just say no to V'ger next time, okay? But say yes to Citizens of Tech. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at Citizens of Tech, subscribe via iTunes or citizensoftech.com, and please tell your friends.
Do I?
Do you?
I hope I do.
Could you be more decisive than that? What is this, Schrodinger's recording?
I have
looking at it.
Yeah, I have a recording as long as you're not listening.
Oh, perfect.
We should actually include that in the podcast. That would maybe I'll splice that into
just recorded it.
Yeah.
But make it an Easter egg at the end if you want. Whatever.
There you go. I like that idea.
All right.